Have you ever noticed that nights get harder when life gets heavier? It's not a coincidence. The enemy loves to target your sleep because when you are exhausted, it's so much easier to feel overwhelmed or to slip into that mode. When that lack of restful sleep is ongoing, it's not long before you're in a cycle of exhaustion and mental fog that rolls from one day to the next. And before you know it, you start withdrawing and disconnecting, and you become increasingly vulnerable, especially with your spouse. Well, in this video, I'm going to share with you one simple strategy that you can implement today that counters the enemy's move, and you can get your sleep life back on track. How do I know that this one simple strategy works? Because I put it to the test myself out of sheer necessity. Let me tell you why. My husband had been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder following a major breakdown, and this came about as a result of his military service. He was bedridden most days due to the debilitating fatigue that would hit him like a truck, and I became his primary carer for a period of time. Now, I was also taking care of our three children, communicating, yes, communicating, coordinating homework, the household, working full time. So guess what? After I'd taken care of everybody else's needs, I turned my attention to me, but there was nothing left in the tank. And I would function on autopilot to get myself through the day and get all the things that needed to be done, and then collapse into bed. And let me tell you that this started to take a toll on me. And I created a pattern and a habit of doing more, thinking that that was the answer. But in reality, that perspective was costing me. Now, let's take a pause for a second. And if you can relate to that kind of scenario and you want to establish a strategic defensive position against the enemy, I want you to grab a notebook and a pen, because in this session, I'm going to tell you exactly what I did differently that took me from sleep deprived, brain fog exhaustion, day to day, to sleep charged, energized, and clear-headed, even in the middle of the challenges that were going on around us. My name's Julie Doran, and I'm a certified coach and rapid transformational therapy practitioner and marriage mentor for Christian women who are navigating challenges in their marriage. And what I share on this channel and in my community is fueled by a passion to help others overcome those challenges and step into a renewed vision, not just for your marriage, but also for your life and for your God-given calling. And you might be thinking to yourself, hang on, what do you mean, Julie, by enemy? You can't be serious. Aren't you over-spiritualizing what's just a typical problem? Well, and you might also think that, Jesus defeated the enemy with what he did on the cross. So what are you on about? You know what? You're right. Yet we can't ignore what Paul wrote in his letter to Ephesians in chapter 6, verse 11, when he said this: "Put on God's complete set of armor provided for us, so that you will be protected as you fight against the evil strategies of the accuser. Your hand-to-hand combat is not with human beings, but with the highest principalities and authorities operating in rebellion under the heavenly realm." Did you notice the phrase strategies of the accuser? Well, what I'm going to cover today is your counter strategy when it comes to getting your sleep life back on track. So let's dive in. Now, when you are going through pressure and stress in your marriage, sleep is typically the first thing that gets compromised. Perhaps you go to bed replaying the day in your mind and wake up almost with a sense of dread, wondering, what's going to happen today? And you know what else? In a stressed marriage, every conversation you have can feel like a minefield when you are both sleep deprived. Why? Well, sleep deprivation causes the amygdala, your emotional alarm, to become as much as 60% more reactive. And that's why a casual comment in a conversation can sometimes trigger a much bigger emotional reaction than seems normal. I'm sure you know what that feels like. And for me, yes, I was praying, and yes, I knew my Bible verses, but I was still being impacted by sleepless nights. And then a friend at work noticed that I wasn't my usual self. And I told her I hadn't been sleeping well with everything that was going on. So she suggested I see my GP, my doctor, to get some medication to help me sleep. I took her advice and I booked an appointment. Now, during that appointment, the doctor asked me questions about things and I explained what was going on in my world. No, my diet wasn't great because, no, I'm not exercising most days because, yes, I feel exhausted most of the time. It feels like it's my new normal. Then we got on to the subject of sleep. By the way, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so that this video gets more reach. Okay, so the doctor asked me to fill in a questionnaire, and I'm so thankful that he took his time with me to go through it. Yes, he filled in a prescription for sleeping medication, but you know what? I never got it filled out because that same day I implemented what the questionnaire suggested that I needed. And it was this: a sleep routine. I wasn't giving myself the transition space that I needed to wind down in an intentional way. I was literally go, 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 then collapse into bed. And my mind just didn't get the memo that it was time to sleep. And then the what if scenarios started playing like an endless reel in my mind. In other words, the anxiety and the worry. So here's what I started to do instead. I began starting my getting ready for bed process not 5 minutes before I hit the pillow, but an hour before I physically got into bed. And also in that hour, there was no TV, no mobile phone in my hand scrolling. I wanted to do something that took my mind into an intentional winding down space. Coloring in, spent some time doing that. Journaling, love doing that. Reading a physical book, I would do that. Something creative and craft related, I would do that. Longer shower than normal, you bet. And it wasn't that I was doing all of these things every single day. I just knew things that I personally enjoyed. And so I would just do a couple of those things in that 60-minute period for me to wind down. As I would do these things, setting this intention of winding down an hour before bed, guess what happened? By the time my head hit that pillow, I was asleep very quickly and would 9 times out of 10 stay asleep unless the children woke me up. And I found that because my sleep was improving, I was having more energy. Because my sleep was improving, the episodes of mental fog started to clear and lift, and I started remembering my dreams again. Now, here's something else that you need to know that's really important to recognize. Routines like reading or other quiet space activities actually transition the body from the sympathetic nervous system or fight or flight mode to the parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest and digest. So doing mainly the same activities every night trains your brain to release melatonin in anticipation of sleep, making it easier to override that alertness state by high cortisol. Now, how about we next transition to talk about some activities that you could do, but also we're going to touch on some of the science-backed methods as well. First and foremost, knowing that you are a believer in God, as am I. spiritual activities to include in that bedtime routine. Because I love to journal, I would use this time to write out a couple of verses from the Bible that resonated with me that day. Using the 1-year Bible that has passages of scripture allocated for each calendar day took the guesswork out of what to read. And I would just turn to the day's verse, and any words that felt highlighted to me, I'd write them down. And I'd also sometimes turn those verses into a written prayer and pray God's words over my circumstances. And I loved the moments when I would go back to previous entries in that journal and just marvel at how God answered those prayers along the way. And then to combat the what if habit of thinking when I'd go to bed, I combated that by redirecting the focus of my thoughts. Isaiah 26 verse 3 says this: perfect, absolute peace surrounds those whose imaginations are consumed with you. They confidently trust in you. Hey, don't forget, if you're enjoying this, hit subscribe so this video gets more reach too. Okay, the second topic, science-backed activities to include in the bedtime routine for you to think about, is brain dump journaling. Now, this isn't writing about your emotions. Instead, it's writing a specific to-do list for the next day. Why? Well, it offloads the storage burden from your working memory to paper. It gets it out of your head. The second thing, electronic curfew. Shut down all screens in that 60-minute window before bed. Blue light suppresses melatonin, that hormone that tells your body it's nighttime. And if you must use a device, then switch it to warm or night shift mode and lower the brightness as much as possible. The third thing is a breathing method called 4-7-8, where you inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 7, and exhale for 8, and do this several times. Why? Because this is going to target the vagus nerve in your body, which activates that parasympathetic nervous system, aka your rest and digest mode, and lowers your heart rate. The next thing I want to cover is creating your sleep sanctuary. This is another strategic step you can do that relates to the room that you sleep in. Now, if you're anything like me, that when they go to bed, they're listening for sounds, counter it by having some white noise playing. This works for me every time. And my personal favorite is just a playlist on Spotify that is nothing but the sound of rain. Now, also too, if there are any sources of light that curtains don't quite cover, think about wearing an eye mask for complete blackout. Also, what can you do in the room to get a cooler temperature? Less layers, an extra fan, something else, because a cooler room helps maintain a lower core body temperature necessary for that deep sleep. Now, if you happen to be someone who is sleeping in a separate room to your partner, I've included this last piece in this video in case that's you and you wrestle with a sense of guilt due to needing to sleep in a separate room to your spouse. I've got a reframe for you. Instead of thinking it of sleep separation, think of it as sleep alliance, because you both can't afford to be sleep deprived when you're going through so much together. So think of sleep alliance as being not just a physical strategic move, but an emotional and spiritual one as well. What do I mean by that? Well, the reality is that poor sleep impairs your ability to recognize God's voice, and it impairs your ability to recognize your spouse's emotion and to be resilient around that and sensitive to that. Sleeping apart for a season can be a preventative measure to ensure you both wake up with enough patience and grace to navigate the day ahead together. Quality rest means you're essentially disarming the biological triggers that might otherwise be more easily activated when in a state of fatigue. I remember hearing Brené Brown talk about this particular myth when it comes to marriage, that it's a 50-50 thing. You share things together 50-50. Well, it's a myth because there are days when you are not at 50% capacity and neither is your spouse. So actually asking each other, hey, what's your energy tank at right now? You know what you're both dealing with and what degree of support you both need. So let's do a quick recap of what I've covered. Establish a sleep routine. Plan some specific winding down activities to do during those 60 minutes that are suited to you. And perhaps that might be something as simple as sitting down with a journal, turning it into a written prayer. There's lots of possibilities. Find what works for you and practice, practice, practice. New habits are worth the change, especially when it comes to improving the quality of your sleep. Now, if you liked this content, there's one more thing that I want you to consider, and that is joining me in my new community, Marital Crossroads to Clarity. It's a faith-based space for you to come to if you're experiencing challenges in your marriage and would value some fresh perspective. Now, I've started this community to be a place where we can go deeper into creating a vision for what cultivating intimacy with Jesus looks like, especially when you are going through challenges in your marriage. You'll find the link below and just come as you are, just no pressure. And lastly, I want to speak this passage over you from Proverbs chapter 3, verse 21 to 25, because no matter what you are going through, God's love, His plans, His purposes for you will not change. And this truth was one thing that I held on to through it all. So here we go. My child, never drift off course from these two goals for your life, to walk in wisdom and to discover your purpose. Don't ever forget how they empower you, for they strengthen you inside and out and inspire you to do what's right. You will be energized and refreshed by the healing they bring. They give you living hope to guide you, and not one of life's tests will cause you to stumble. Let me know in the comments below if you got something out of this video. I'd love to hear from you.